Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we have reached the third lesson of the Tafseer of Surah An-Nisa, and we have reached verse 4. So we'll begin by listening to the recitation, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح فإن آنستم منهم رشدا فادفعوا إليهم أموالهم ولا تأكلوها إسرافا وبدارا أن يكبروا ومن كان غنيا فليستعفف ومن كان فقيرا فليأكل بالمعروف فإذا دفعتم إليهم أموالهم فأشهدوا عليهم وكفى بالله حسيبا.
So in verse 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the translation of the meaning, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, that give women their bridal gift upon marriage. Though if they are happy to give up some of it for you, you may enjoy it with a clear conscience. Or in Muhammad Asad's translation, which sounds quite nice at this point, then enjoy it with pleasure and good cheer. So in this ayah we can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about a haqq, a right of women, which is their right to the sadaq, or their right to the bridal gift, or also known as the dowry or the mahar. This verse comes after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes in the beginning of the surah the importance of fulfilling the rights of others. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. Be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who you ask by, meaning you swear by Him, and also be conscious of the arham, be conscious of your ties of kinship. After that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the believers to give the orphans their wealth upon reaching maturity, as we will discuss. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also commands the people to give women or give wives their bridal gift upon marriage. And both categories, orphans and women, have a common denominator. They were easy to be subjects to dhulm and injustice. Orphans because they are children, they don't have a protector, they don't have their father to protect them, and so it was very easy for someone just to take care of them and consume their wealth unrightfully. Women, as we know, also in times of Jahiliyyah, were also subject to a great deal of dhulm, whether it be the way that they were treated, whether it be in terms of their financial rights and their marital rights. In all areas there was a great deal of dhulm. And this surah will clarify that, and we will see in so many cases how that is the case. And last week we looked at the ayah of polygamy, the ayah which spoke about marrying more than one wife. And we actually said that in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually restricts the amount of people you can marry. Because in Jahili times, if you remember, a man could marry 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 women if he wanted to, which would naturally lead to injustice. It would naturally lead to women not being taken care of properly by their husbands because they're so overwhelmed by the amount of wives that they have. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that if you are of people who fear, you have a lot of fear with regards to the amwal of the yatama, right? That you are afraid that you will be unjust to your orphans, that with that same attitude, you should have that with regards to your wives. This was one understanding, as we mentioned, right, of the Mufassirin. And there were other understandings of the verses we discussed in great detail last week. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we says in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about another category of people who were easily, they were abused, and they weren't given their rights. And they were women who were not giving their sadaq, or they were not given their bridal gifts. Now, the mahar itself, firstly, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, give women their bridal gift, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually addressing in this ayah? Who is the mukhatab? Who is Allah addressing? So the common understanding, or probably the understanding that will come to most people's minds, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the husbands, isn't it? Because it's the husband that gives the bridal gift to the wife. Many mufassirin, though, are of the view that the mukhatab here is actually the wali of the woman, is actually the guardian of the woman. So traditionally, in pre-Islamic times, if a woman was given mahar, who would take control of that mahar? Her father, her wali, her guardian, right? And so when a girl would get married, people would congratulate the father. Yeah? Why would they congratulate the father? Because he's now going to become richer, right? He would become richer because he's going to. And subhanallah, even in certain societies, you still see this practice today, right? In certain communities, I've seen this. It's not that common. Maybe some of you might have experiences and seen this within yourself, within your own communities. But the guardian keeps hold of the money. Now, there could be a discussion about, this maybe would have happened many decades ago or hundreds of years ago if it was a young girl that got married, right? And so there needs to be some sort of financial taking care of in terms of her bridal gift. But otherwise, this was a jahili practice, a pre-Islamic practice, where the father would hold on to the wealth of the mahar, or the sadaq, what is known as mahar or sadaq, or bridal gift or dowry, and he wouldn't give it to his daughter. Or, as we said, it is addressing the husband, right? وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ, that give the women their saduqat, which is the plural of sadaq, the plural of dowry or sadaq, which indicates that that the sadaq itself, or the dowry itself, can be given at a later date, right? It can actually be given at a later date, and unless of course the wife, the woman, demands her mahar after the consummation of the marriage. So upon consummation of the marriage, then she is fully entitled to the full amount of the mahar itself. But in some situations you find that people get married with a mahar given at a later stage. And different people have different urfs, they have different traditions. Like in certain countries they have a muqaddam and a muakhar. So you have a muqaddam, which means that you give a part of the dowry like at the time of the nikah, and then you have a muakhar, you give another part of the second part of the dowry at a later time. And some people even make the mu'akhar to be upon divorce. Like if it ends up happening that she ends up being divorced, then you give the second part of the dowry basically. So it gives her some sort of financial security. So there are different traditions in the people, and there is a lot of flexibility in the Sharia for these matters. We will discuss inshallah in more detail the actual ahkam of mahar in more detail later. I wasn't actually intending to speak about it now, but there are some verses in Surah An-Nisa that speak about the mahar. So when it comes to that, we will discuss it in more detail inshallah ta'ala. Now, in terms of the concept of the mahar itself, what is the concept of mahar? What is the idea behind it? Why was it legislated? What is the hikmah, the wisdom behind there being a dowry? Especially in this day and age, you find a lot of sort of modern-minded people, they find it a bit odd, right, for there to be a mahar, because they think it's like, oh, I'm buying my wife, right? Like I'm putting a price on my wife, and so they don't really like that idea, and so they prefer maybe not to give it, or they prefer to make it something which is insignificant. It just becomes just a procedural matter, right? Symbolic, but otherwise is not a serious amount of money. Here we need to understand that the mahar itself, the bridal gift or the dowry, number one, it's something which is wajib. It is an obligation to give. It's something that must be given. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, that give women their dowry. Sometimes it might not be musamma, sometimes it might not be explicitly stated in a marital contract, which in that case, what we say a person is entitled to maharul mithl, like the standard sort of rate of mahar, which can obviously differ from community to community and class of people, etc. And again, we'll discuss the issue of how much it should be and all of those issues later, inshallah. I'm sure many of your young frustrated men have many questions regarding mahar and the amount, etc. Right? So inshallah, that will come at a later stage. But the key thing that we must understand about mahar is one of the key ways that we distinguish the marital contract from other types of relationships. The other types of relationships, right? So for example, how is marriage different to a long-standing relationship? Mukhadana, right? So you have mukhadana, you have bigha. These are different types of relationships. Bigha would be essentially like prostitution, where you're paying someone to be intimate with them. Mukhadana is when you basically, in this modern day and age sort of terminology, is when a person has a partner, like a boyfriend or a girlfriend. This is mukhadana. And these are all forbidden in our religion. All forbidden in our religion. So one of the key things that distinguishes nikah, the marriage contract, from these other types of relationships is that of giving the mahar. And the mahar itself is something which, if you look to the word itself, you have mahar, but you also have the term sadaq, which is the word which is used in the ayah here, saduqatihinna. It's related to the word sidq, as we can see. Sadaqah is related to the word sadaqah as well. So, what does that indicate? If you look at it from in terms of the ishtiqaq and the etymology of the word, like we say that sadaqah is called sadaqah because it's the sign of sidqul iman, the truthfulness of a person's faith. Sadaq is called sadaq, a mahar or dowry is called that in Arabic, sadaq, because it is an indication of the person's truthfulness to be committed to this person that he is going to marry. It's not just going to be a one-night stand. It's not just going to be like a casual relationship. The fact that he's giving the mahar is a true indication of the seriousness of his commitment. And also because he is fulfilling his promise. Right? So in the marriage contract he will say, I agreed to marry this person with this amount of mahar. Right? So when he gives the mahar, that's the sign that he has been truthful. Okay, so it's a sign of truthfulness. It's a sign of fidelity. It's a sign of honesty. It's a sign of commitment. So this is the meaning itself. Now, some scholars were of the view that the sadaq itself is a type of iwad, or a type of compensation, you can say, where you give the mahar, and in return for giving the mahar, you are allowed to be intimate with your spouse. Right? Which is a way that some of the jurists and fuqaha have spoken about it. Similar to like nafaqah. When a man spends on his wife, he buys her clothes, he gives her food and shelter, then this entitles him to intimacy. Right? So there is this contractual type of understanding towards to a marriage contract. But clearly this is not what makes a marriage successful. Right? We don't look at marriage as a legal procedure, right? As something like, okay, or because the wife says, okay, because you've given me money, you've given me my food, you're allowed to be intimate with me. That's not how it works, right? Marriage is obviously meant to be based upon care and affection and love, etc. But these are just legalities. But as some scholars, they said, to view the mahar like this is probably not accurate, because if that was the case, then that means the mahar itself needs to be repeated habitually. If it's a matter of transactional nature, where you have to, that giving the mahar is what entitles you to intimacy. Right? So there will be a type of tajaddud every time that they are intimate, therefore he has to give something. But that's not the case with mahar. That's clearly not the case with mahar. So there is something more to mahar than simply looking at it from a transactional matter. Number one is what distinguishes it from other types of haram relationships, as we said. Number two, it indicates a person's commitment. Right? A person's commitment. And that's why, not so long ago, a brother came up to me and he said, oh, I want to get married to this person, but they've asked for a very high amount of mahar and I can't really afford it. So what do I do? So I said, well, it depends on you, really. Right? Are you really committed to this person? Do you really want this person that badly? Right? Do you want to really marry this person? Because otherwise there are other people that you could marry. So it really depends on you. So if you agree to giving a high amount of mahar, that really indicates your commitment and your desire to be with that person. Right? So, but otherwise, a person has other options. It all depends on, how much you want to commit and how much you desire the marriage itself. Sorry? We'll come to that. Yeah. وَآتَيْتَهُنَّ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا. If you were to give them a qintar, like a whole mountain of gold, literally, Allah says, you're not allowed to take anything, from it, indicating, according to some fuqaha, you can give actually quite a lot. But as I said, that will come, inshallah, when we come to discuss those ayat, inshallah. Okay. Right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. Nihla, an interesting word which is only mentioned here in Surah An-Nisa, nihla. Which here we've translated it as if you give it to them, actually in this translation, Abdul Halim's translation, is quite difficult to see where that's been translated. Give women their bridal gift upon marriage. Depending on the way I suppose you understand nihla. So let's break it down. What is nihla? What does it mean? Now nihla, the word nihla in Arabic is what we say is an atiyya. It's a gift. But there are many words for gift in Arabic. You have hadiyya, you have hiba, ata, etc. But what makes nihla significant is that it is a gift bila iwad. It's a gift in which you bila qasdi iwad, meaning you don't intend to get something back as a result of giving. Like sometimes people give gifts because they want something back from the other person, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that when you receive a gift, give a gift back, isn't it? That's the sunnah, right? If someone gives you a gift, give a gift back. It you know, tahaddu, tahabbu, like, you know, be mutually give gifts to one another, right? That's with hadiyahs. You don't have to, right? But it's a common understanding. But when you give a nihla, when you give this type of gift, there is no expectation of anything in return. There's no expectation. You're not expecting anything in return. Which is why the view that some scholars had, that, you know, it's not really accurate to view the mahar, it's not very accurate to view it in a transactional way, as if to say, I'm giving you the mahar, now we can be intimate. No, you're giving the mahar as a gift, right? You're not expecting anything else from that. Now, if you look to Ar-Raghib al-Asfahani in his Mufradat al-Fadh, in his which is a brilliant text on the meanings of the words in the Qur'an, he says the following: وَاشْتِقَاقُهُ فِي مَا أَرَى. The etymology of the word, in terms of where it comes from, أَرَى أَنَّهُ مِنَ النَّحْلِ. Nahl, we have Surah An-Nahl, isn't it? What's Nahl? A bee, right? So nihla and nahl. نَظَرًا مِنْهُ إِلَى فِعْلِهِ. If you could take into consideration what the bee does. So he says, Allah says, وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is revealed to the Nahl, yes? So he says, he carries on, he said, وَبَيِّنَ الْحُكَمَا, like the wise people and the philosophers and or, you know, people who have studied these, you know, natural sciences, they said, أَنَّ النَّحْلَ يَقَعُ عَلَى الْأَشْيَاءِ كُلِّهَا فَلَا يَضُرُّهَا بِوَجْهٍ. If you see bees, right, wherever they go, whatever they land on, لا يضرها بوجه. They don't harm anything, meaning they don't pollute. They're not like flies, you know, like black flies that go around and spread their vomit and, you know, everywhere, they're filthy, spread germs. Bees are actually very clean. وَيَنْفَعُ أَعْظَمَ نَفْعٍ. And they actually bring a lot of benefit. In fact, bees, if you think about it, they're one of the reasons why there's pollination, isn't it? Right? They collect the nectar, and when they collect the nectar from a flower, they also, you know, they are part of the pollination process. فَإِنَّهُ يُعْتِي. And also, what does it give? Like flies don't give anything, but bees obviously give honey. فَإِنَّهُ يُعْتِي مَا فِيهِ شِفَاء كَمَا وَصَفَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. They're not just that, they give shifa, which is nutrition, which is a healing, which is a curing, etc. So therefore he says, وَسُمِّيَ الصَّدَاقُ بِهَا مِنْ حَيْثُ إِنَّهُ لَا يَجِبُ فِي مُقَابَلَتِهِ أَكْثَرُ مِنْ تَمَتُّعِ دُونِ عِوَضٍ مَالِي. And so sadaq is also considered to be a type of nihla or nahl. It's like a bee, in the sense that when the bee, it gives, wherever it goes it gives. Does it expect anything in return? No, the bee doesn't want anything in return. If you think about it, ajib, right? The bees, they work so hard to make honey, right? Like, what do they really get in return for it? They're just producing it for the benefit of the rest of mankind, right? It's a gift to mankind, and it's a pure gift as well. It's a natural, organic, pure gift, a God-given gift. And so likewise, the nihla, or the Allah subhanahu, when He says when you give the sadaqat, it is given as a nihla, it's given as a gift. And who is this gift from? It's not from the husband. This gift is from Allah. This is how the scholars explain it. Ibn al-Anbari, he says, كانت العرب في الجاهلية لا تعطي النساء شيئا من مهورهن. In Jahili times, men wouldn't give their mahar to their women. You would go elsewhere, or you would stay with the husbands, or they would just give it to the guardians. فَلَمَّا فَرَضَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ الْمَهْرِ. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated the mahar, كَانَ نِحْلَةً مِنَ اللَّهِ. It became a gift from Allah. أي هبة للنساء فرضا على الرجال. So it became an obligation for men, but it was a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. Look how Allah honors women. Allah honors women in this way. So that's why it's a right for them, because Allah has obligated upon men as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So mahar, don't belittle it. Don't think of it as a small thing. And if it ends up being a lot, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's fadl that He gives to this woman. Right? We need to, especially for the men amongst us, right? You need to view the mahar like that. It's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't just view it as a financial burden. Something that Allah has obliged and obligated. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated and obliged. And when the woman, she takes this mahar, she should see it as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This should make her therefore appreciate the wealth itself, be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it, right? And therefore consider, therefore the marriage itself becomes dearer to her heart, because it's through the marriage that she receives this gift, however big or small it may be, but it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who would want to refuse a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that's why we said, even if in a marriage contract, there's no mention of any mahar, right? Which legally can happen. You can legally get married without mentioning the mahar, but she will be entitled to something eventually. Maharul mithl, yani the standard sort of rate of mahar, whatever it may be. There was one more point I was going to mention. Yes. There were other views as well with regards to going back to the translation, actually, with Professor Abdul Halim's translation. So we actually can see it now. So give women their bridal gift upon marriage. If you view nihla as a gift, so rather than simply a dowry, a bridal gift, right? So the nihla, I suppose, can be found in that part of the translation. Nihla has also been interpreted by some scholars to actually refer to it being a faridah and a wajib and an obligation. Yani give it, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atun nisaa sadaqatihinna nihlatan, yani give it as a faridah, as an obligatory act, or diyanatan wa shir'atan, or as a diyana, as a religious sacred practice. Nihla, right? So al-minal, you've probably heard of Shahrastani's book al-milal wa nihal, right? So nihla can also, wa nahal can also refer to a religion as well, even. So give it religiously, meaning give it in a prescribed manner, which is enshrined within Islamic law. But that doesn't take away the meaning of the gift, because it's an obligation upon men, but a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then says, فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. So though if they are happy to give up some of it for you, you may enjoy it with a clear conscience or enjoy it with pleasure and good cheer. Now, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so after commanding the men to give the mahar, which is an obligation upon them, but a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now naturally, when someone gives you a gift, you naturally feel like being generous as well, isn't it? You feel like being generous. And so from a woman's generosity is that she might want to rescind her right, give up, or happy to give up some of it for her husband. So she can reduce the amount later if she wants to, or she can choose to completely rescind it. So imagine there was an agreement, right, that the mahar will be X amount of money, right, which is, which is for you to give after, say, a month's time, right? Or she can take it all right at the beginning of the marriage contract, and then later on she gives it all back to her husband. If she wants to do that, she can do that. That's within her right. That's within her right. This is at-tanazu' an haqqiha. Yani she's just, rescinding her right, and anyone has a right to do so. If you have a haqq, you can give up that haqq if you choose to do so. But here though, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ. If you are happy, عَنْ طِيبِ النَّفْسِ, if you are happy to give it. Why, if you are happy to give it, why stipulate that? Not just if you give it to them, then they can eat it. No, because some men might have bad character and they might play a guilt trip on their wife and just sort of pressurize her and like, oh, I gave you so much mahar and now I'm quite poor, what can I do? Right? And you're sort of pressurizing her, sort of prodding her, like, can I have my mahar back? Right? And she feels pressurized. This isn't good. This isn't good practice. Right? You shouldn't pressure. Now a man might turn around and say, oh, I'm not forcing her. Right? But no, it shouldn't be a matter of, it's not, even if you're not forcing it, but if you're pressurizing her, right, in order to give the mahar back to you, then this is not good practice. It will only be considered fine if she gives it عن طيب النفس, willingly, happily, right? Willingly and happily, she's happy to give it to you. Then in that situation, there is no problem. There's no su'u mu'ashara, there's no bad treatment. He's not, again, forcing her, applying pressure. In that situation, فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا, then enjoy it with pleasure and good cheer. And so here though, some scholars, they did say, فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ, that if you choose to give up some of it, some, Allah doesn't say if you choose to give all of it up, which is what led some scholars to say that if a woman does decide to give up some of her mahar, then she shouldn't really give up all of her mahar. I mean, if she was to do so, legally it's acceptable, right? Legally it is acceptable, but she should be careful and keep some for herself. So if you were to give away some of it, right? And this, and we'll see this throughout the other ayahs when it pertains to the huquq and it pertains to the rights of people, that when it comes to giving and taking, people can sort of go to extremes. وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبَذِيرًا, right? Don't be like a spendthrift. Like don't be excessive in the way that you give things. There should be moderation, right? As we will see, there needs to be that type of moderation. So but as I said, purely from a legal and fiqhi perspective, if a woman was to rescind all of her mahar, then she has the right to do so. But another question that rises from this is the issue of ruju', is the issue of after rescinding your right and after a woman has given up her haqq to the mahar, later on can she then go back to her husband and say, I've changed my mind, I want my mahar back? Now the majority of the scholars, they say no, this is not permissible. Right, as a general qaida, as-saqit la ya'ud. Right, as-saqit la ya'ud, meaning anything that's been rescinded, you can't go back to it. The Prophet ﷺ said, you know, a person who goes back to his sadaqah, right, al-a'idu fi hibatihi kal-kalbi fi qay'ihi. And the person who goes back to someone after giving them charity is like a dog going back to eating its own vomit again, which is, you know, it's quite an explicit way of depicting how horrible such a thing is. Imagine a dog vomits and then he goes and eats his vomit again. It's disgusting, right? So likewise, al-a'idu fi hibatihi, if a person goes back to their gift, like I've given you a gift, I've said you can keep it, this is a gift, and then you demand, I want it back. No, you can't demand to have it back. That's not a right thing to do. So the majority of the scholars were of the view that a woman has no haqq of ruju', of asking for it back. However, and this shows you the sensitivity of this topic, there were some scholars who were of the view that she can, under certain circumstances. This was the opinion of Shuraih, Abdul Malik ibn al-Marwan, and even according to the fatwa of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Why? Because they said, لها الرجوع, she has the right to go back. Why? لأنها لو طابت نفسها لما رجعت. Yani if she really gave it happily, she wouldn't really ask for it back. Now this depends, right? Because in certain circumstances, a woman could ask for her mahar back in very unsavory conditions. So for example, in the early years of their marriage, they're very happy, right? They are in love, and you know, and she has so much respect for him, and you know, she says, no, don't worry about the mahar. You don't have to give me my mahar. Or here, take the mahar back, it's yours. And then a few years down the line, their marriage breaks down. Right? And she says, no, I want my mahar back now. Right? So really, she could have given it at the beginning of the marriage, an tib nafs, in good spirit, but then later on she becomes spiteful and she becomes angry with her husband, and so she demands for it back. Which is why the majority of the scholars, they say, no, look, once she's given it up, that's it, she can't ask for it back. Imam al-Awza'i, Imam al-Awza'i rahimahullah, he had a very interesting opinion which shows you his fiqh. He said, لا يجوز تبرعها ما لم تلد, that she cannot give up her mahar until she gives birth. أو تقم في بيت زوجها سنة, or until she has stayed with her husband for a year. This is fiqh, subhanallah. Right? Imam al-Awza'i, he understands that in the beginning stages of a marriage, people are very happy, they're willing to give up all of their rights to please their spouse. Right? But later on, when things kind of settle down, when the honeymoon period is maybe over, right? People start thinking about their huquq. People start thinking about their rights. Not about forfeiting their rights, but demanding their rights. And that's from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why He's legislated these huquq and these rights. So he says, until she's given birth, right? So if she wants to give back her mahar after that stage, then you know she's not like just simply in the honeymoon sort of phase, and she doesn't mind giving up all of her rights for the sake of her husband, or once she stayed with him for a year. And this was, as I said, the fatwa of the qada of Umar radiallahu anhu. He actually wrote to all of the qada. He actually wrote to the judges. He said, "Inna nisaa yu'tina raghbatan wa rahbatan." He said, women, they give up their mahar raghbatan wa rahbatan. Sometimes they give it out of willingness and desire for goodness. Sometimes they give it out of fear, meaning they feel pressurized. And for the qadi, it might be difficult. It might be difficult to ascertain, did she really give up her mahar willingly, or was she pressurized into it? So he said, "Inna nisaa yu'tina raghbatan wa rahbatan فأيما امرأة أعطته." So any woman who ends up giving up her mahar, ثم أرادت أن ترجع فذلك لها. So if a woman then wants to go back to her mahar, because we don't know, did she give it really happily, or did she give it back? Did she give her back the mahar out of pressure? So in that situation, then she has the right. Right? إذا كان بين العطية وبين الرجوع قريبا. If she demanded her right back shortly after she rescinded it. So if it was the case that she shortly after, she changed her mind. So right at the beginning, she said, "No, don't worry about it. You can keep the mahar. We'll take the mahar back." Then a few moments later, she says, "Actually, no. No." The fact that she changed her mind within a few moments indicates that she didn't really give it an tib nafs. She didn't really give it willingly, happily. If you gave it happily, you'd be no. There'll be no hesitation. So, that was the qada of Umar radiallahu anhu. But as I said, majority of the fuqaha, generally speaking, are of the view that she doesn't have the right, to ask for it back if she gave it according to the ayah an tib nafs, willingly, happily, and in good spirits. So فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا. Then in that situation, فكلوه, you can consume it, which literally means to eat, meaning the wealth itself. You can keep it, you can consume it, you can use it. هنيئا مريئا, which is an expression, هنيئا مريئا, which is an expression to indicate that you can enjoy it with a clear conscience, don't feel guilty. Right? You don't have to fear any negative consequences. Right? You don't have to fear any negative consequences. So this is hana bil hana. We say eat happily in good spirit. The word hani linguistically has a meaning of something which tu'manu aqibatuhu. It's something which, if you do, tu'manu aqibatuhu, you don't fear any of the negative consequences. It's like with food, right? You can have delicious food, but that food might have negative consequences. Might be full of calories and fat and oil and give you a heart attack later, right? But when you eat something hani'an, there are no negative consequences you can think of, right? This is one of the meanings of hana. Right? And mari'an, when you say mari'a at-ta'am, idhan hadama wa humidat aqibatuhu. And mari'an means when the food is good, right? And when you digest it, it digests really well, and it just leads to good consequences, nothing bad. On the contrary, it helps your body grow, right? Gives you energy, it's good for your body, it's healthy, gives you nutritional value, etc. فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. So you can enjoy it, and you don't have to think of it negatively as though it's a bad thing that you have done by taking back the mahar of your wife. But the key thing is, as we mentioned, when you take back the mahar from your wife, it's something that she gives willingly, happily, and in good spirit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says in the next verse 5, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ, that do not entrust the sufaha, the incapable among your dependents, with your wealth, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a means of support for you. التي جعل الله لكم قياما. Another riwayah, قياما. وَرُزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. But feed them and clothe them from it. وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. And speak to them kindly. So this is now the third hukum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about. Right? So the first hukum was about major hukum. There are obviously sub-ahkam mentioned, but the first major hukum was giving amwal to the yatama. Give the wealth to the orphans, and then give the bridal gift to your wives, or to the women. So this is the third, وَلَا تُؤْتُ السُّفَهَا. So after Allah says, give, Allah then says, don't give. Right? Make note of that. Allah, He says, وَآتُ الْيَتَامَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ. Give the yatama their wealth. وَآتُ النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ. Give women their saduqat. And now He says, وَلَا تُؤْتُ السُّفَهَا. Do not give the sufaha your wealth. Right? So we can see why after there's there are two commands to give. Allah now balances it out by saying don't give in this case. Because if you're told to constantly give and give and give and give, what can that lead to? That can lead to you developing an attitude that, oh, as believers, we should just give freely without any restriction, isn't it? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us here the importance of having a balanced attitude towards your wealth, right? And this is expressed in so many places in the Qur'an. وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا. Don't spend extravagantly. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. Those who are extravagant are from the brothers of the devils. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَدَكَ مَغْلُولَةً إِلَىٰ عُنُقِكَ. Don't make your hand tied to your neck, meaning being miserly. وَلَا تَبْسُطَهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ. And don't extend it out so freely, otherwise you'll end up being, blameworthy. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا وَلَمْ يَقْتُرُوا. Allah says, He explains the believers, those who when they spend, لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا, that they were not extravagant, and nor were they miserly, but rather they were balanced in the middle. Which shows you therefore that the believer is someone, when it comes to wealth, right, he needs to have this ri'ayah, this sense of having a responsible attitude towards wealth. This is what the Qur'an teaches us, that when it comes to wealth, we do not completely become negligent of wealth and say, oh, mal is just dunya, this is just innama amwalukum wa awladukum fitna, wealth is just fitna, and therefore you disregard it. No, Allah in so many places tells us to spend. Wa anfiqu, right? After Salatul Jumu'ah. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله. As soon as Salah is finished, right, go out and seek your provisions. Work. Right? That's why some of the Maliki scholars, they say, even based upon this ayah, there's no sunnah ba'diyah after Salatul Jumu'ah. As soon as Salah finishes, go out, make money. Right? And Jumu'ah shouldn't be a day off as well. Some fuqaha say, in the Muslim world, right, Friday is a day off. I mean, it's understandable, it's a blessed day. But Allah says, seek provisions, and everyone goes home, right? But anyhow, it's not, I'm not making it a must, but right. So we have to have this balanced approach, and that's why, subhanAllah, a beautiful fa'idah that Imam al-Biqa'i, he mentions in his Tafseer, right? And he says, وَقَدْ حَثَّ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى عَلَى حُسْنِ رِعَايَةِ الْمَالِ. Allah encourages people to learn how to manage their wealth. فِي غَيْرِ آيَةٍ فِي كِتَابِ. In so many places in the Qur'an, right? And he quotes a hadith. This is the hadith of Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. It's such a beautiful hadith, right? So Amr ibn the Prophet ﷺ, he summons Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, and he says, I have something for you. And so he summons him, and he comes and he says, I want you to to go out, right, into battle, and there'll be good news of ghanima and war booty and wealth, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, right, I didn't make hijrah for this. I didn't make hijrah for money. I didn't make hijrah for this purpose, right? He wasn't opposing the Prophet, but he was trying to say, look, I'm not doing it for wealth. I'm not doing it for money. The Prophet was trying to entice him. Look, there'll be ghanima, you can enjoy yourself, and you can attain something from the battle. And so he replied, Ni'ma al-malu salih li rajulin salih. How good, Ni'ma al-mal salih li rajul salih. Yani, if your wealth is halal and good, the Prophet ﷺ is expressing how good it is for a righteous man. So if you're a righteous man and your wealth is halal, ni'mal al-mal al-salih. Right? How good that wealth is for a righteous man. Why? Because he explains, Imam al-Biqai, he says, لأن الإنسان ما لم يكن فارغ البال لا يمكنه القيام بتحصيل ما يهمه من الدنيا. If a person if his mind isn't freed, right, from key matters, he won't be able to take care of himself in the dunya. Meaning, if your mind is constantly focused on, how am I going to live? How am I going to pay the bills? Right? How am I going to afford to do this? How am I going to afford to pay for this and pay for that? It's constantly on your mind. And financial worries can really be debilitating, isn't it? They can really stop you from doing so many things and prevent you from thinking and pondering and ibadah, and right? It's financial worries are extremely stressful. وما لم يتمكن من تحصيل ما يهمه من الدنيا لا يمكنه أمر الآخرة. If you can't take care of your dunyawi affairs, you won't be able to take care of your ukhrawi affairs, your afterlife affairs. ولا يكون فارغ البال إلا بواسطة ما يكفيه من المال. And you can't be فارغ البال, you can't be free in your mind unless you can take care of your financial matters. لأنه لا يتمكن في هذه الدار التي مبناها على الأسباب من جلب المنافع وضرف المضار إلا به. You can't be established in this life, right? This dunya, which is built upon asbab. Allah created this world with asbab. You want to live, you have to seek out the means. You have to seek out the means of attaining benefit and repelling harm. فَمَنْ أَرَادَهُ لِهَذَا الْغَرَضِ. Now listen to this. He says, فَمَنْ أَرَادَهُ لِهَذَا الْغَرَضِ. Whoever seeks wealth for this purpose, if you seek wealth for this purpose, so that you can free yourself to work for your akhirah, كان من أعظم الأسباب المعينة له على اكتساب سعادة الآخرة. Then this becomes one of the greatest means to help him achieve happiness in the afterlife. If it's for that purpose. وَمَنْ أَرَادَهُ لِنَفْسِهِ. But whoever wants this wealth for his own pleasure, كَانَ مِنْ أَعْظَمِ الْمُعَوِّقَاتِ عَنْ سَعَادَةِ الْآخِرَةِ. It becomes one of the biggest impediments for achieving happiness in the afterlife. Because he أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ وَاتَّبَعَهَا. This person just is clinging on to the earth. He just wants wealth for the sake of wealth. He just wants wealth for personal gratification. But if you look at your wealth as a means to free yourself for ibadah, to free yourself to focus on your akhirah, then then your pursuit becomes blessed, right? Your pursuit becomes blessed. Allah puts barakah in your wealth, right? And you are freed from the worries and the distress that afflict so many people in this day and age. Exactly, yeah. Great companions were very wealthy. Uthman radiallahu anhu, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, extremely wealthy companions. And they were able to do so much. They were not people of the dunya, they were people of the akhirah. So, there was a fa'idah I wanted to share from Imam al-Biqai, rahimahullah. So the point being here is that, how is this connected to our discussion? We said that in the beginning of the surah, Allah mentions two types of giving. وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ. Give orphans their wealth. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ. Give women their bridal gifts. And so now, don't think therefore that it's a matter just keep on giving, give. No, there needs to be moderation. So, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. So don't give the sufaha. The sufaha, the word sufaha is the plural of the word safih. Safihun. والسفيه الذي لا يحسن التصرف في المال. The safih is someone who doesn't have financial competency, right? Either due to being a minor, either during a child doesn't know how to take care of his money, right? Someone who is majnoon, someone who is insane, someone who's ma'atu, someone who is just like, has some, cognitive weaknesses, right? Such people shouldn't have take on the responsibility of administering large amounts of wealth, right? They might not have this rushd, financial competency, as we mentioned, like minors, as I said. So here, and some scholars actually say included in this is women, right? Now some women might not like to hear that, right? But just to understand the context of it, right? Obviously in the past, women weren't given really a financial role in society, right? When they were young, they were looked after by their fathers. When they got older, they were looked after by their husbands. They had no financial responsibilities. They wouldn't buy, they wouldn't trade, they wouldn't do anything. So they were not accustomed to, right? They weren't accustomed to financial dealings, right? So safih itself is not actually a word which seeks to, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a, sorry? Mockery, yeah, there's another word I'm looking for. Belittlement, there's another word. Derogatory. Jazakallah khair. Who said that? Okay, Jazakallah khair. It's not actually a derogatory statement. السفيه الذي لا يحسن التصرف في المال. This is safih. The person who he simply can't or is not competent with financial matters. Right? So, when you call a child safih, it's not derogatory. You're not insulting him. You're just saying, look, you don't have the financial means, right? You don't have the competency to deal with these matters. Obviously, in this day and age, right, women tend to have far more financial competency, right? But the idea here is you don't give your wealth to as-sufaha. Now, what is interesting here is the pronoun وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. Allah didn't say وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ. Don't give the sufaha, don't give the sufaha, those who are incapable amongst you, their wealth, even though that's how majority of the scholars interpret it. But why has he said أَمْوَالَكُمْ? This is because as a guardian, as someone who takes care of a minor or someone who takes care of someone who is young or someone who doesn't have the financial competency, when you're looking after their wealth like an orphan, you're in charge of their financial matters. So from a relative perspective, this is your wealth. And we shouldn't be surprised, because the wealth that we possess in this dunya, is it really our wealth? It's not, is it? Our wealth is whose? Allah's. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says your wealth, amwalakum, your wealth, don't do this with your wealth, etc. And it's relative, from a relative perspective, it's your wealth. But in reality, it's not really your wealth. So this shouldn't be a surprise when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, don't give the sufaha your wealth, meaning you're in charge of their wealth. It's not actually yours, but you're in charge of it. Since you're in charge of it, you have a type of authority over it. Just like your own money. Just like your own money, right? We describe it as being your wealth even though you don't actually own it. It's actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is from the karam and the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that He praises people when they give charity even though it's not really their money. Right? So He praises you for something in reality that He gave that wealth to you. Right? And He praises you for giving it away, something that is not even yours. Okay, so وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ الَّتِي جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا. So do not entrust the incapable among your dependents with your wealth, right? Meaning if those who are dependent upon you, if you're looking after an orphan, etc., or there's someone under your care who has wealth, you're taking charge of it, don't give it to them if you think that they are safih. If you think that they are financially incompetent, don't give it to them, because the purpose of, you don't want them to waste that money. You don't want them to be cheated. You don't want them to end up losing all of that wealth due to poor administration. So وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ الَّتِي جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا, that Allah has made a means of support for you. Right? That wealth is meant to be a means of qiyam by which you take care of them. Not to waste their money and to let it all go down the drain. وَرُزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then says, وَرُزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. So then take care of them, feed them and clothe them from it. Now what is interesting, Allah says وَرُزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا, and He doesn't say وَرُزُقُوهُمْ مِنْهَا. وَكْسُوهُمْ. Even though in the Arabic language fi can also have the meaning of min, from. So most people have translated it and feed them and clothe them from that wealth. So you take care of that money, you take care of them. Right? But the fi has an interesting thing, because fi indicates what we say dharfiyya. It indicates place and space. As if to say, اجعلوها مكانا لرزقهم. Make that wealth a means for their provisions. How? بأن تتجروا وتتربحوا. By using their wealth, right? Meaning clothe them and feed them from the profit that you make from their wealth. So when you take care of their wealth, don't let that wealth just sit there in an idle way. Because what happens if you do that? What's going to happen? Every year you have to pay what? Zakat, isn't it? So if that wealth just stays there, every year zakat is just eating it away. So you are encouraged, as a person who is in charge of somebody else's wealth, you are encouraged to do what? Invest. In a good way. Allati bil ma'roof, in a way which is good, right? Which you think will be profitable and bring back further money to the person that you're responsible for. So feed them from that wealth, from that additional wealth, from the profit that you're making. La min sulbil mal, not from actually the capital itself, and min ra'sil mal, from the capital itself, but rather from the profit that you make. Right? So we can clearly see, financially we have to be responsible, we have to be smart, we shouldn't let wealth go wasted, right? Financial responsibility, ri'ayatul mal itself. وَارْزُقُوا فِيهَا وَاكْسُوهُمْ وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, and say unto them a good word. Now, and speak to them kindly. This is interesting. Why, when it comes to Allah speaking about financial matters, why would He conclude this verse by saying and speak to them kindly? Now, when someone is safih, when someone is financially incompetent, they might become frustrated. Right? If you're the guardian and you tell them, look, I'm not going to give you your money yet, you're clearly not ready. You're too young, or you're incompetent, right? You're not responsible enough. The person can take that quite badly, isn't it? Right? And sometimes people can be quite aggressive, especially when it comes to money. Unfortunately, that's where things become very emotive. People become very emotional when it comes to money. People start becoming very demanding, right? Some people can be very possessive, right? And so this is a situation where things can easily go out of hand verbally. Subhanallah, look at the foresight and the hikmah of the Qur'an. Right? Allah knows these are situations where things can go wrong. So Allah commands the people, وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. So, إِذَا طَلَبُوهَا, when they ask for their wealth, say to them, Insha'Allah, in a kind way, you will receive your wealth in due time. Say in a pleasant and polite way, with lutf, with gentleness and kindness. Right? جبرا لخواطرهم. So you say it in a way just to give them ease and peace of mind. Make dua for them. Some scholars interpret this to mean make dua for them. Like if they're safih, if they're financially, because they could be like an adult but they're just financially incompetent, make dua for them. Don't belittle them. Because as a guardian you might say to them, what's wrong with you? You're just a waste of space. You're just, everything, every venture you go into, you make a huge loss. Right? And so you could hurt somebody's feelings. And so this part of the ayah really teaches us the importance of empathy, of being considerate of other people's feelings and emotions in this situation. Make dua for them. Say to them a kind word. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he concludes this ayah by saying the following. He says, هذه الآية الكريمة انتظمت الإحسان إلى العائلة. We can see within this noble verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathers within it a number of points. Number one, al-ihsan ila al-aila, showing kindness to your family. وَمَنْ تَحْتَ الْحَجَرْ بِالْفِعِلِ, and also those who you might end up interdicting, and those who you might apply hajar to. Hajar is interdiction, where you prevent someone from spending their own money, right, due to their incompetency. So, it shows you, this ayah teaches us the importance of ihsan to your family and those under your authority. من الإنفاق في الكساوى والإنفاق والكلام الطيب والتحسين الأخلاق. All of this it shows, right? Spending on your family, buying clothes for them, feeding them, speaking to them in an honorable way, and generally observing tahsin al-akhlaq, generally showing good character towards your family. All of this we can find within this ayah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And on that note we will conclude for today. Inshallah, as usual, we'll open the floor for questions. You can go to slido.com, inshallah, sli.do, and the code is Tafseer, TAFSEER. We'll take some questions from the floor first. Yes. In what way? Yeah. No, if when it comes to the distribution of inheritance, if you think someone can be classified as safih, financially incompetent, they're still entitled to their full share. But if you have custody or you are some type of guardian over that person, you can look after it for them. Possibly, yeah. But they are still entitled to whatever the Sharia determines for them. Yeah. Allahu a'lam. Alaikum assalam. It's the عكس الإسراف. القطر هو يعني كقطر المطر من السماء، يعني صغيرة، بخيل. What is the ruling on temporary marriage? As many people believe this is acceptable. If you mean by temporary marriage that you go into a marriage knowing, right, and that this can happen in two ways. You can either go into marriage stating that it's going to be a temporary marriage. This is clearly haram. Right, this is known as mut'ah, right, which is not in our Sunni tradition. So this is haram. Sometimes people go into marriage in their minds it's going to be temporary, Right? Now this is, but it's not explicitly stated in the contract. This is not good, right? And there was a big issue in Al-Azhar many years ago because we had many students that came from different parts of the world, right? Anyways, no need to raise that as a dead issue. I don't want to bring it here. But otherwise, no. I mean, if it's explicitly stated in the contract, that's not valid. Yeah, it's not valid. Allahu A'lam. How is it called when the end of a surah matches the beginning of the next surah? You could say, how is it called? This is التناسب بين الأطراف. التناسب بين أطراف السور. When there is this connection between the ends, the taraf, at the end of a surah and the beginning of the next surah. This is a munasaba. And there are different types of munasabat. There's munasabat بين السور. There is this connection between the surah, and there's munasabat بين الآيات. You see this nazam and coherence between the ayat themselves. And then there's the munasaba between the beginning of the surah and the end of a surah. There's a very nice book by Dr. Fadil Samurra'i on the khawatim, the ends of surahs, right? How the end of a surah connects with the beginning of the next surah. And he also has in the same book how the beginning of the surah connects with the end of the surah, right? This is in Arabic. I don't think it's been translated into English. Are there any guidelines whereby one should base what they ask for mahar-wise? Let the ayah come. When we discuss the ahkam of mahar, we will discuss that in detail, inshallah. How do you know when a woman is being a gold digger when asking for mahar? Example, 10k in comparison to a woman of principle. Wow, okay, that's quite a strong statement. So if a woman asks for 10k, she is not a woman of principle. It's all relative, right? I mean, if she's like from the, if she's related to the Sultan of Brunei and she asks for 10k, that's a good deal, right? Al-urf, this is the problem. You see, the urf here is not like it was in the past, right? Because in the urf, in the past, the urf was pretty standard. But we live in communities now where we lived in a very mixed, multicultural community. People of different backgrounds. We have Muslims from all over the world, from different backgrounds. So, for example, the mahar in a Bangladeshi family might be very different to the mahar of an Indian family, right? Or an Arab family. So there could be huge differences. Like the mahar in, say, for example, amongst reverts, I have seen, generally speaking, to be very low in comparison to, say, the mahar from people, say, in Bangladesh and Pakistan. Yeah. 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 There isn't a fixed urf. Yeah, I'm willing, inshallah, when it comes to the ayah of mahar, right, we will go into detail, right? So inshallah, let that time come, inshallah. So the thing we have to understand that there are people of different classes as well, right? So if she's a woman, for example, who's highly educated and comes from a very wealthy family, the urf of her, I mean, amthalihin, like for the likes of her will be different to a woman who's not educated, who hasn't been to university. So we'll come to the explanation of that, because that hadith has a meaning. Aysaruhunna doesn't mean necessarily aqal, not necessarily. We'll come to that, inshallah. Okay, we'll come to that. Allahu a'lam. But yeah, so I mean, but going back to the question, right? I mean, look, to using the term gold digger, I mean, right? You see, if you think, if that's in your mind that look, she's a gold digger, then obviously don't marry her. Simple as that. If you think she's a gold digger, then don't marry her, right? But there could be different reasons why the mahar might be quite high. It could be because her parents demand that for her. Maybe not her. A lot of the times it's not the woman herself that's deciding it, it's her father. Right? So she might be someone who, doesn't really mind receiving anything, right? Any amount, but it's her father. And then you have to look into, you might want to take a huge risk, right? Where if in the situation where the mahar is a deferred mahar, right? And they agreed to it to be deferred like after a year, right? And your wife, the woman you want to marry, doesn't want that much. There's a likelihood she might rescind some of that amount, right? But that's a risk you need to take if you really want to marry that person. Yes, yeah. Okay. So the rizq of, so everyone has their own rizq, right? But obviously when a child is now added to a family, when a couple have a child, their rizq as a whole of the family will increase, right? And that's taken into consideration the rizq of the child. Yeah, so it's essentially because obviously the child, him or herself, won't possess any rizq, right? It will go to the parents. So it could be in the form of, for example, the father gets a pay rise, right? So that's actually that, and that could be due to the rizq of the child. Yeah, it could be due to the rizq of the child. And that's why we say generally having children is a reason for greater barakah in one's provisions. Wallahu a'lam. Can a woman rescind her right to a mahar in a misyari marriage? I mean, look, misyar marriages, number one, it's not a good practice. To marry a woman, right, on the basis that she's like essentially a halal girlfriend. No responsibilities, right? You don't really live with her, you just spend time with her. She gives up all of her rights. She doesn't ask for anything, no financial rights, right? This is really, when people do this, they're just using a legal loophole to get married. And it doesn't fit into the ethos of what a marriage is meant to be, right? So people who involve themselves in such marriages, it's just, it's not a good place to be in. Technically, it can be halal. Right, so there's nikah, there's shuhud, there's a wali, everything is there. Yani the basic conditions of marriage are there. But she says, look, you don't have to give me rent, you don't have to give me food, you don't have to live with me, but just spend some time with me. He's given, look, he might have given a mahar, there's ijab and qabul, the wali agrees to it. But come on, does this really fit within the spirit of marriage? No. So whether she rescinds her right in this marriage or a normal marriage, it's technically, legally, right, acceptable. Walaikum assalam. If the financial incompetence is permanent due to disability or illness, can their children spend on themselves, or is that theft? When we mean spend, we don't mean like day-to-day spending. Like you can have someone who is safih, but they can go to the shop and buy food. That's not a problem. What we mean here is major financial dealings. Like you won't give the child, if a child, for example, inherited £1 million, you can say, okay, here, I'll give you, say, £100 a month, put it in your bank account, your spending account, right, your current account, and you can buy whatever you want on a monthly basis. You need food, travel money, etc., not a problem. But to give him, the child who inherited like £1 million, here, take the £1 million, do whatever you want with it, this wouldn't be right. Right? So we're not saying that they're not allowed to spend a single penny of their own money, as they wish. There's a limit to it. That's the idea. And that's obviously determined there is no fixed, strict amount that you can give, that you have to allow them to have. It's based upon the urf of the people. can the mahar be fulfilled within the marriage periods? As I said, the mahar can be given if you want to give it, at the time of the aqd, you can. Immediately after the aqd, you can. If you want to give it later, like just say, look, I can't afford it now, I'll give it to you after a year's time. If they agree to that, that's fine. Yeah, so the matter is quite flexible. You can give some now and a part of it later. Right? You can do that, inshallah. In our times with many high mahar, this is leading to many brothers not able to get married, which is leading to zina and porn addictions. It's becoming impossible. Yes, I mean, it's definitely difficult, right, for people to get married. In some countries it's worse, right? If you go to the Muslim world, I remember when spending time in Egypt, subhanallah, the average age for people to get married in Egypt was like mid-30s, late 30s, right? Early 40s. That's when people get married. You're like, subhanallah, right? Really difficult, really, really difficult. And this shouldn't be the case. Marriage should be, should be made easy, right? Marriage should be made easy. It should be, right? And that's how it should be. But it's just poor understanding, unfortunately, on part of the awliya, on part of the guardians and fathers. But it's not just that as well itself, right? I mean, if you're, putting in blunt terms, if you're a bum, right, you can't blame high mahar. If you're someone who's not working, you haven't earned much money, you have to take a part of that as, responsibility. You have yourself to blame as well. Okay? So, and in situations like this, it's easy to point fingers. Frustration can lead to that, right? But have patience, have sabr, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist you. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a beautiful hadith, ثَلَاثَةٌ حَقٌّ عَلَى اللَّهِ عَوْنُهُم, that there are 3 people that Allah has made it a right upon Himself to help. And one of them was الناكح الذي يريد العفاف, the one who, now according to one understanding, means the one who is married and he seeks chastity, but another understanding is the one who seeks marriage for the sake of chastity, to save himself from haram. If you truly seek marriage for that reason, not just to fulfill your desires, no, because you want iffah, you want chastity, you want to attain chastity, you want to protect yourself from haram. حَقٌّ عَلَى اللَّهِ عَوْنُهُمْ, it is a right upon Allah to help. Wallahu a'lam. Can a woman ask for high mahar as a way to indicate that she doesn't want to marry that man? Well, I mean, if she doesn't want to marry that man, she should just say it, right? وَلَا تَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ is also applies to men as well, right? Don't leave them like stranded, right? Just suspended, right? So, if you don't want to marry, just be clear. Don't play with people's feelings, right? If it's clearly you don't want to marry that person, make it clear. If a woman is known for showing her beauty and not really practicing, should a brother consider rejecting marrying these sisters if they ask for high mahar? I mean, if you're acknowledging that she's mutabarrija, she's someone who is explicitly showing her beauty and not really practicing, don't marry her for that reason. Choose to not marry her for that reason. Don't choose not to marry her because she has a high mahar. If it's between the two issues, I mean, to me, sadly, it shows you where your concern is. It seems as though you are more concerned about the money aspect than the deen aspect. فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ, يعني seek the one with good deen, right? And that's what you should. That should be the ultimate, criteria. Yeah. 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 Time, yeah. Hmm. No, dayuth, it applies to a man, right? A man who is very negligent with regards to his women folk, like his mum, his sister, his daughter, his wife, allows her to intermingle with men very loosely, right? We don't really apply that term to women, right? Because the man has a responsibility to safeguard the woman. So if he doesn't, then he's dayuth. But a woman doesn't have the responsibility to safeguard the man in that aspect. Yeah? Wallahu alam. Yes. Hmm. Yeah. With translations, the brother asked with when it comes to the different translations, obviously a translation in essence is a type of tafseer. Yeah, it's in reality it's a commentary, and that's why we say it's a translation of the meaning of the Qur'an. Most translations don't really offer explanations for their chosen translations. Only a few do. So from the very few, you have like Yusuf Ali's translation. His translation is, if you read it with his footnotes, very, very rich, and often some really insightful observations. Same with Muhammad Asad's. He often explains his choice and reason for explaining his translation. The only thing is with Muhammad Asad's translation, he often sort of leans to sort of modernist interpretations. But to be honest, he often makes that quite clear, right? Like, I prefer this, and even though he will say it's a bit of a modernist sort of way of looking at it, in a loose sense. Also, the Clear Qur'an by Mustafa Khattab often offers some explanation as well in his footnotes, and sort of the variant ways you can maybe look at it. So those translations are good for that particular perspective. But I always recommend people not to stick to one translation. It's a very enriching process when you read numerous translations at the same time, because it gives you the different perspectives and it just gets you to think, right? So, yeah, Wallahu alam. There is a man I wish to marry, but our parents make it difficult to meet often with a mahram. Can we private message and talk about daily things like work? So it seems as though you are in the khitbah process of the engagement process. So and if you need to discuss logistical matters relating to the marriage, right? If it's relating to logistical matters like the arrangements on the wedding day, or post-marriage arrangements, or even pre-marital arrangements in terms of things like mahar, etc., and other things, you can contact each other. Legally, from a shari'i perspective, it's not haram, right? But you have to just keep your guard up, right? It's very easy to maybe just start talking very loosely, and that could obviously it can lead to problems, right? So you have to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam. What is the ruling for a husband paying for everything after marriage, given the society we live in London? Well, I mean, the default ruling is that the man is responsible for taking care of his family, including wife and children. If you mean, I'm not entirely sure what you mean, what is the ruling for a husband paying for everything? If you mean by that, does a woman bear any responsibility? Right? Is a woman, from a shari'i perspective, is she responsible for contributing to the income, considering our circumstances? Technically speaking, no. Right? This is something which is ingrained within our sharia. financial responsibility falls upon men. Right? Even though society is taking us elsewhere, we have to resist. We have to stick to our values. We can't always conform to what is new, right? And abandon our values, right? It is enshrined within our Sharia, within our religion. It's not merely a cultural matter. It's actually the responsibility of the man to provide. In verse 5, we are saying there should be moderation when giving sadaqah. I mean, that's one of the implications we said, right? That that's one of the things that the Qur'an generally teaches us. We are often encouraged to give, as much as possible. Meaning as much as possible within your, within the amount that you can give as charity. So when people say donate as much as you can, they don't mean empty your bank account for us. What they mean is give as much as you can from your surplus wealth, right? And that's how most companions would actually give charity, from their surplus wealth. The poorer companions actually complained to the Prophet. They said, Ya Rasulullah, ذهب أهل الدثور بالأجور. He said, O Messenger of Allah, the wealthy companions have taken all the reward. يُصَلُّونَ كَمَا نُصَلِّي وَيَصُومُونَ كَمَا نُصُومُ. They pray as we pray, they fast as we fast. But وَيَتَصَدَّقُونَ بِفُضُولِ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. But they give charity from their surplus wealth. Yeah. And there were a few companions who would give more than that. Like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Right? And other companions. But that's not the default way of giving sadaqah. As for rescinding your right, you can ask for it back. Can that apply to if a husband or wife regarding their rights, they can ask for their right back? Generally speaking, the default position, as we said, that if you rescinded your right, you've given up your right, you can't ask for it back. There was a minority opinion that says you can under certain circumstances. But in principle, once you've given up your right, you can't ask for it back. Should a woman at any point have to disclose her wealth or wage to her husband? If you are in a situation like that, right, I do worry for you, I'll be honest. I mean, your spouse is meant to be, the person that you confide in the most, right? You're meant to be the closest person to you should be your spouse. If your spouse doesn't know and you're keeping it a secret how much you earn from them, that's not a healthy thing for a marriage, I think. It's not a healthy thing, right? But from a legal perspective, she's not required. She's not required. But again, don't look at these things from a legal perspective. This is one of the biggest problems. Whenever you see marital problems between people, right? Everyone immediately wants to know their haqq. Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? That's not how you live a loving relationship, brothers and sisters. Right? The huquq are there in order to prevent wrongdoing. The haqq isn't there to foster love and affection per se. Right? So as soon as you're in a situation, in a marriage, where everyone starts talking about huquq and rights, this is my right, you owe me this, or you don't, the alarm bells should start ringing. Right? That's not to say these huquq are, there's a reason why Allah has placed His huquq there, in order to enshrine people's rights, so there's no wrongdoing. And so these rights are resorted to, right? And calling for your rights is resorted to when there is wrongdoing taking place, right? And sometimes attaining your right, you can demand your right, okay, but that's not going to guarantee a loving relationship. Wallahu a'lam. Right, so many questions relating to Mahar. Inshallah, as I said, we'll come to discuss these issues later, inshallah. I heard you don't have to complete paying of the mahar if the woman doesn't pray. Well, if she doesn't pray, well, I mean, easy. I mean, if she doesn't pray, right? There is a minority opinion amongst the fuqaha, a person who doesn't pray is not a Muslim. Right? But that's not the issue here. What I worry about is that the person is more concerned about the mahar rather than the validity of the marriage itself. If you don't have to complete paying the mahar because she isn't praying, that means you shouldn't be married to her according to your understanding. Because what's the reason why you shouldn't pay her if she's not praying? Because she's not Muslim. Right? If she's a murtad, an apostate, you shouldn't marry her. So, this to me, it seems like, and that's a minority opinion anyway. Right? The majority of the scholars are of the view, if a person doesn't pray out of laziness, he's still a Muslim, or she is still a Muslim. That's the opinion of the majority of the fuqaha. Okay? Right. Mahar, lots of mahar questions, right? If a wife rescinded her right of being provided for by the husband, nafaqa. So if you mean by nafaqa, now the thing with nafaqa tatajaddadu. Nafaqa is something which continuously is required. It's not like mahar. Mahar is given once and that's it. Right? So you can rescind your right to nafaqa in certain ways. Like if you say, look, this month I don't want anything from you, okay, that's fine. But what about the following month? Okay? Inshallah, the details of that will be discussed in future lessons, inshallah. Right, okay, we need to conclude there for today. I'm sorry I couldn't answer everybody's questions. I tried to focus on the questions that were relevant as well to today's lesson. Inshallah, I shall see you all next week. Jazakumullahu khairan. And please, I need to leave now, inshallah. So I have family here as well, so we need to go home quickly, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.